Irish Hills were singing to the tune of Kevin Harvick. He gets win number 2 of 2019, has the number 4 team regained their strength just in time for the playoffs. Hey everybody, welcome into Backseat Drivers. I'm Alex Weaver here with Kim Coon and Zack Albert. Guys, we are 3 races away from the playoffs. I know I don't need to remind everybody. And this week is the night race at Bristol Motor Speedway. So let's take a look at the playoff picture now heading into Bristol. We had some heavy movers that moved up. Daniel Suarez, Ryan Newman, some heavy movers that moved down. Jimmie Johnson and Clint Bowyer. Who do we think can head into Bristol and make even more moves, or who are we looking at that could possibly struggle?
Do you want to go first on this one?
After you, sir.
Oh, my goodness. I think this is another opportunity for Ryan Newman. And I think part of what has happened with him is he hasn't wowed us with like a string of top 5s, top 10s, but he is consistently there. And by and large, they've been error-free, and they've put together a lot of finishes that, maybe otherwise, without the combination they've got, they might not have achieved. And I just think that this has been kind of an opportunity for him. Veteran presence at Bristol, and you kind of need that. And so I think I think he's the one I'm looking at for keeping in there.
I'm going to say I'm going to see a shakeout between Daniel Suarez and Clint Bowyer. I think they're going to flip-flop in positions. They've both done well at that track, but Suarez, I think, has had a better lead-up into the Bristol night race. He has a lot of momentum, and I think that we're going to see something special from him this weekend in Bristol, and that he's going to steal that spot from his teammate.
Well, it's interesting that we've talked about Ryan Newman flying under the radar almost every single week, and he's consistently proving us that he's going to be typical Ryan Newman and sneak in there. And then we've also talked about Clint, who has had these rough weeks. So can we look to Bristol to turn the Clint Bowyer 14 train around?
We just got to figure some stuff out. What I need for these type of racetracks, we have speed. The thing flies in practice by itself, qualifies up front, and then you're just like, oh gosh, what's that mean for the race? Because almost every single time we struggle.
They need something to turn around, and I think, like to your point, Jimmie Johnson needs something to turn around really quickly. And it's crazy that we're 3 races left in the regular season, and it's make or break time. It's
also crazy how one race can change everything, because Jimmie Johnson was in the clear. Now he's 12 points to the bad side, whereas Clint Bowyer is now just 6 points to the good, and Daniel Suarez, to prove off of your fact, is only 6 below the cut line.
Yeah, there was such a shakeup after Michigan. I think the shakeups are still to come. We've got 3 races left. I think you could see a shakeup potentially every single week before we hit the playoffs. I'm looking to Jimmie Johnson, though, to see where this team is in Bristol. I think we thought we were going to see a lot of good big sparks from Cliff Daniels being top of the pit box. I'm not saying that's not going to happen yet, but he was a little distracted the past weekend. He was on baby watch. So I think it's going to take a few more weeks than we originally thought for this team to really start gelling and getting to a position where they can start getting top 10s, top 5s, and wins. I don't know if Bristol's the place, though, where they're going to set sparks.
Yeah, and I think they would not have made that crew chief move unless they thought it was the absolutely right thing to do. And to your point, this is only 2 weeks in. We've got a little bit of this, but to kind of take root and for them to kind of form a bond and make those waves. But when Jimmy got out of the car, and yesterday, he kind of admitted that he was pressing and trying to get every single bit that he could get out of it. And that's how that mistake happened. And he, kind of took that on him, which, is great to take ownership of it. But that was a lousy day. And they can't afford to have that many more of those.
Yeah. All right. In my backseat driver's world, only one can get in. Is it Jimmie or is it Clint?
Oh, that is tough. I think we're going to see more mistakes from Clint and that team. I think they're not executing. And not to say that Jimmie's going to just light the world on fire with his performances.
Sneak it in.
Yeah, but I think if I'm choosing between Clint Bowyer and Jimmie Johnson, it's Jimmie that's going to be in. We're going to see, Clint trying too hard, he's going to get mired back in the pack and end up like he did this past week in Michigan, where he gets just caught up in something because of his track position.
I think part of it too is the way the tracks kind of play out as well. I think when you look at Darlington and Indianapolis, I'd give the slight edge to Jimmie there on those. And but I think it's going to come down to the wire, and I think it's going to be really tight with those. I'd give the slight edge to Jimmie basically just on familiarity at those tracks where he's won before.
All right. Well, if you took to any part of NASCAR social media last week, you saw that there were, let's just say, no new friends made. So Bristol is a chance where you can kind of get a little bit of payback. The feuds seem to have cooled down a little bit, but Bristol is that opportunity where you can go out there and maybe reignite that fire. Are we looking to any of those past feuds to kind of reignite this weekend?
I don't think we're going to see any of the feuds necessarily that we saw in Watkins Glen. I think they had a week to cool those off, and even some drivers that were outside of those feuds, guys like Denny Hamlin said, it really depends on the racetrack. You're close, you're side-by-side racing at road courses and short tracks. In Michigan, that's not the case. So I think those feuds that were coming off Watkins Glen, they've had time to cool. Now as we move into Bristol, I don't necessarily we're going to see those feuds that we saw in Watkins Glen. I think we're going to see some other ones pop up, maybe some new ones.
And Bristol's kind of like that. I mean, you've got
everybody leaves Bristol mad,
angry.
You have 500 laps of, for so many times you're behind somebody and just trying like the devil to get past them. I mean, that's one of those where I think, there could be feuds that we haven't even looked at that could spark up that, we haven't even considered. So, surely there's people that have that memory bank and they think back to their history and they're like, you remember when he did this to me at Watkins Glen? Surely that can come up, but I think Bristol's kind of a ripe ground for where new ones could just emerge.
I always say that drivers have the longest memory of anybody and any athlete out there. So who can we look for? I know that Kyle Busch is always a topic of discussion here. We saw Martin Truex Jr. Kick his car last year. So what can we expect on the track as far as tempers?
Tempers. I think you always have to look at, if you look at the Busch brothers, usually they're far out enough in front that they haven't had to mess with any of that kind of fray. Last year we did have that with Truex and Kyle. So
was it last year that Kyle Busch had basically no car left? Was that last year?
Yes, I remember the day that the fuel filler was you're just struggling to actually to fuel the car just to kind of keep it together.
Yeah. I think we're going to see a lot of conflict. I'm looking at the guys that are near the bubble, specifically Ryan Newman and Clint Boyer. I'm also putting Blaney in that grouping. He always tends to find himself
caught up in something
when we go to short tracks. Doesn't really matter the driver. He always ends up upsetting somebody. I'm going to throw him into the mix. And then I think Clint's going to get really frustrated this race. I think whether or not he gets into it with another driver, I think we could hear some radio antics from Clint Boyer this weekend.
Well, the driving's already been pretty aggressive, and we're not even in the playoffs yet. So we can also look at Bristol to somehow be a chance for a driver that wasn't necessarily picked to win, but to come up there and spark that energy and really get into victory lane. So who are kind of some of the underdogs that we can look at to pull the upset at Bristol?
I think you have to start and end with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I mean, I think they have really circled this race. Yep. He finished second in this race in 2016, and this has been one of his best tracks if you take out Daytona, Talladega, and the places where he's won. This is just a real big opportunity, and maybe the last opportunity in these last three races for him to come up and shine.
I talked to Stenhouse back in the spring race at Bristol, and he told me that he wishes every single weekend could be Bristol Motor Speedway because he thinks that he might have a chance to at least win one. So I think he's looking forward to it.
Yeah, I agree. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is in kind of my mix of guys who this is maybe their last and only opportunity to get into the playoffs. I know that's what they think. I'm also going to add into the mix Matt DiBenedetto and Ryan Preece. Not necessarily that they're going to win, but that they could have strong showings. We're going to see them running in the top five. We've seen what Matt DiBenedetto can do on short tracks. And then Ryan Preece, I know he didn't finish well there in the spring, but he's won there in modifieds. He's won there in Xfinity. But I actually don't think we're going to see like a surprise winner from guys that aren't in the playoff picture. I think the surprise is going to be from somebody who's in the playoff picture who hasn't won yet. So I'm looking at guys like Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson, Eric Jones, who have all performed really well at Bristol, who are eager for that win to kind of pad their playoff points piggy bank.
And DiBenedetto had that, I think he got his first top 10 there with a really spirited drive at Bristol. And so I think the driver matters to a certain degree there. And so he willed himself to that finish. And so I think there's a chance for him there. But I especially like the Larson pick too, because he's really taken to Bristol and really likes that place. And I think that's another one. Even though he's fairly comfortably up in the points, still wants to scratch that win column first.
Now, I love a good story, but I think you guys are forgetting, how do you get past the Busch brothers at Bristol? Is there a chance for a driver to break through? Because Kurt won this race last year. He had his incredible hair when he got out of the car post-race. And then Kyle tends to find victory lane every single time that he goes to Bristol, regardless of what he's driving. So how do you maneuver past those two guys? I know Kyle Busch wants a win, too. He's been a little frustrated.
How you maneuver past them? Not easily. Because Kyle Busch, I mean, I think part of what has helped them is not only just having a fast car and having a liking to that place, but confidence. I mean, because they have, each time the Busch brothers roll in there, I think there's a certain swagger, and I think. For instance, I mean, Kyle Busch, as well as he's driven there, I think you have to look at him as easily the favorite, but I think you also kind of keep it in the family. I think both of them they have to be at the top of your chart.
Yeah, we're just waiting for Brexton to show up to Bristol.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree a little bit. Sure. I do think Kyle Busch is obviously a guy you have to put in the conversation when you come to Bristol. He won the spring race, but I think he's in a very different headspace this Bristol than he was in the spring when he won. I don't know what's gotten into him. He was able to salvage a 6th place finish off of Michigan, but something is not right in his head. And when he gets in that space, he goes one of two ways. Either he takes it and runs with it and he wins races, or he's beating himself up. He's mired in the middle of the pack. He's getting frustrated. And I think that that's the direction he's going to go this weekend in Bristol.
All right. Well, let's look ahead to green flag or caution. Kim knocked this out of the park last week, so
no pressure.
No pressure, Zach. All right. So I'm going to set up these scenarios. If you agree with it, it's a green flag, and then say why. And then if you disagree, you're throwing out the caution, and you also can state your case for that. All right, so first scenario, we are going to have an upset winner Saturday night at Bristol.
I'm going to say green flag. Yes, we're going to see an upset winner. And by upset, I mean a guy who's already in the playoff picture but hasn't won yet. Like I said, a Ryan Blaney, an Eric Jones, a Kyle Larson. So, yes, a new winner at Bristol.
I'm going to say put it out, and let's go with a caution because I think it's going to be a familiar face, whether it's a Kyle Busch or a Martin Truex or someone like that, or someone from the Penske camp, and they've done really well there too. If you talk about Brad Keselowski and Joey Logano, what they've done in the past, I think it's going to be a familiar face. I think we might see an underdog sneak in a top 5 or something close to that, but I think it's going to be a familiar face in victory lane.
Well, this is their chance to get it done. All right, second scenario. Jimmie Johnson gets back in the playoffs after Saturday night at Bristol.
I'm going to wave the caution flag. I do not think Jimmy gets back into the playoff picture. I think he might make some gains in terms of points, but I do not think we'll see him in that 15th or 16th position.
I'm going to say green flag, and I think it's probably because how could things get worse? I mean, and that's kind of a fatalistic view of it, but things have to be turned around soon, and I think Bristol is kind of one of those places where that's really tough to do. But things just, I think he's at the bottom, and I think things will have to turn around for him at some point soon.
Yep. All right. Next up, all 4 Stewart-Haas racing cars make it into the round of 16.
I'm going to wave the caution flag on this. I think once we get to the playoffs, Clint Bowyer will not be going for a championship.
I'm also going to go with the caution on this too, and I think there's Suarez has taken a big rise, and his name is kind of reinserted back into this picture. I think it's going to be one or the other. I think it's between him or Bowyer, and I don't know if there's enough room in town for both.
All right, next scenario. They are only 20 points separating these two drivers, but Kyle Busch walks away with the regular season championship.
That's a tough one. I'm going to wave the caution flag. I think in the next 3 weeks, Joey is going to leapfrog Kyle somehow. He's going to get really good stage points and take that regular season championship.
I'm going to go with the green flag on this one just because I think, look at how Kyle is, you talk about favorable tracks, and I think Darlington, Indianapolis, he's been dominant there on multiple occasions. I think those are going to be tracks where he holds serve.
All right, last chance is we have set the Trucks playoff field. We had Grant Enfinger, who won the regular season championship for the Truck Series. Does he win the championship for 2019?
I'm going to wave the caution flag on this one. Yes, he's the regular season champion, but he did it without a win. And I think to win the championship, you got to have a win. And this team has not brought wins to the table yet.
I'm also going to put the caution out. I think he has been super consistent, but I don't know that is going to benefit him in this format. And I'm also looking at the steamrolling watermelon man of Ross Chastain and what they've been able to do. And if I'm looking at a prospective favorite out of the field of 8, I'm leaning towards Ross Chastain.
Yeah, we would be okay eating some watermelons in Homestead.
Sure.
To celebrate.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you guys for being here. We'll see you guys right back here next week, but we're heading to Bristol Motor Speedway. It's America's night race. It's Bristol, baby, Saturday night at 7:30 p.m. on NBC SN. See you guys next time.